Okay, hello and welcome to the first of the explanatory videos in the series on the 8 orders. There was an introductory one, which you may or may not have seen already. The purpose of the first one is to get you to watch this one, so here you are. So this is the first of 4 explanatory videos. In this one, we're really going to talk about the nature of cognitive maps broadly. The 8 orders is a kind of cognitive map. What are cognitive maps? What are they for? And what are the things that we need to worry about with cognitive maps? So we're going to look at here at an understanding of this concept, which is cognitive maps. Any kind of map, any cognitive map is going to be one in which we, first of all, get to say, okay, where am I? Where am I? What's going on with me right now? Where am I on, if it's a map of a physical place, it's like you go into the mall and there's this kiosk that says, there's the red dot, says, you are here, okay, at Orientis. So the first thing that we have to do is to be able to know where it is that we are, where am I, what am I grounded in, what's my experience. The second thing the map is going to tell us is where we might be. So I may be at the fair and I want to figure out, okay, well, where are the funnel cakes and where's the main stage going to be? So I'm looking for where it is that I might be, but that might be a place of some kind of understanding. I might be somebody who really can actually understand calculus, for example. Where might I be? And then what do I need to do to get there? There's all kinds of strategies that are going to move me from where I am to where I want to be. What are those strategies? And the map will at least suggest those. If not, in some cases, the map lays it out very specifically. This is what we can expect is going to be necessary for you to get to where you want to be. Okay? So, cognitive maps have a number of functions. This is certainly true of the 8 orders. So we want to look at those just so we kind of understand why this is it. Why is this so important? So the first is that cognitive maps are mental models that organize and represent information internally. That is, this map is inside myself, but it describes the relationship between truth and reality. Now, we use the words truth and reality sometimes pretty much interchangeably, but for our purposes here, I want to suggest to you that there is something that is real. There is a really real, and we cannot fully know it. We can just sort of get a hint at it. So we're peeking in on our attempts to discover what is real. We're going to talk more about this in the next segment, but about how do we know what is true. But truth is our description of reality. And the truth that we are describing is something that we have formed out of the mental representations that are our maps. The maps give us a way to structure knowledge. They make things easier to understand because now I can fit these things into categories and see relationships. And there are many ways that we will talk about the nature of these cognitive maps. There are frameworks, there are paradigms, there are heuristics, there are hierarchies, there are perspectives. We're going to come back to the whole notion of perspectives in just a minute. But there are lots of different ways that we can make sense of things, different kinds of cognitive maps. So sometimes I have this, it's sort of like I'm carrying around this folder with a bunch of maps in it, and I've got a problem. It's sort of like, do I have a map for this one? Do I have a way of understanding this? And some of these maps are really old, but they're great. And some of these are really old and they suck. So we need to be careful about the maps that we construct because sometimes they're old, they're out of date, they don't fit. There are, in fact, cognitive distortions. So we want to hold on to these maps lightly. We don't want to grip them and say, well, this is a fundamental truth. This is always, we know people who do that, but of course we don't do that. But some people will just hang on to a way of understanding it, despite the fact that they have reason to know that it's not accurate. Okay, so we want to hold these lightly. And these maps also help us to clarify new experiences as they come in. Oh, I haven't experienced this before, but this is kind of like something else. And so these maps help us to make sense of the world in a way that we otherwise could not make sense of it. So these maps can be very valuable this way. And so we want to use the simplest possible map because a simple map allows me to know that I'm going to understand this. It's fairly straightforward. I don't have to overthink it. Some friends of mine gave me a T-shirt for my birthday. Says, "Hold on, let me overthink that." So, but as Einstein cautioned us, he said, everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. Which is to say that use the simplest map available to you that will actually solve the problem. But sometimes the map that we're using won't actually solve the problem. It's too simple. So we're going to talk about complicated and complex maps. But another aspect of this is to notice if this map isn't working, if what I'm doing is not solving the problem, I'm going to have to look for a different map. I'm going to have to look for a different understanding of what it is that's going on here. And so I'm suggesting to you that the 8 orders, as complicated as it is, as difficult as it is to get our heads around it, it's a very valuable map for that reason. It can help us say, oh yeah, look at this. We can discover things. Now, as I said back here, as we're talking about this whole question of knowledge structuring, and one of the things that we look to are things called perspectives. And a perspective is an aspect of awareness. It's a way of looking at things that involves 3 things. There's something I'm focusing on. In this case, there's this tree here that I'm focusing on. It's where I'm looking from, the locus of my identity, and it's the lens that I look through. And so this is a perspective is these 3 held together. When I'm focusing my attention on a given object, a subject, this is what there's a problem, and I'm looking at it from a particular place. This is where I am in my life right now. This is what's going on with me at the moment. And here's how I'm making sense of it. This is a kind of perspective. This is what we call a perspective. Now, for the purposes of what we're doing here, the lens is the cognitive map. So I'm looking at the same thing from the same place, but if I swap out the lens, I'm going to see something differently. You remember when you were in junior high biology class and you adjust the head on the microscope. Now you're going to see things differently. So how closely we look at something will shape what it looks like. But it's also true that when the things that we look at will bring us to a particular perspective. So this is a chalk drawing on a sidewalk, and you can see there's this pole here and there's this bench here. It's a little hard to know exactly what it is, but if we move to the right about 8 feet, what we discover is this, because then you can see here's the pole, here's the bench, everything's incorporated into that. But now it looks like she's looking at something behind her, but that's only because we're seeing in 2 dimensions. And so this, when we move to the right place, when we look from the right locus, from the right location, this is what we're going to see. Now let me give you another example here. This is also sidewalk art, and it's very hard to see any idea what in the world is that's coming out to me. But if you look back here, there's that tripod with this eyepiece on it. So if we go to that, we'll go around to the other side, look through that eyepiece, what we see is this. Yeah, I'll give you another look at that. See? Very different set of concepts come up when we see it from the right perspective. Now, one of the reasons that this is something we want to pay attention to is that sometimes somebody will give you a particular cognitive map, like tell you about a particular thing that's happening in politics, maybe a conspiracy theory, what's happening under the pizza parlor. And they put together a set of facts, true data points. And because of all these, because we got these things, if you look at it, if you look at these from a particular perspective, you put this stuff together, it makes sense. But of course, you have to rule out a bunch of data points that don't make sense. And so a particular theory, religious, political, philosophical, there are lots of different theories that will, if you want to make sense of it, it moves you into a particular locus. You're in a particular location. You're not free to move around because you have to see from this point of view in order for it to make sense. So this is one of the reasons that we want to be careful about what we're doing here. Because this perspective, this lens here, we're going to swap this out and try to make better sense of it, better sense of what we're looking at, because we have a better lens with which to look at things. Okay? Now, cognitive maps are necessary, they're vital, they're very helpful. They can help. One of the things they can do is to help us develop as we grow up, but they can also stunt our development. So I've given you the example of, if you're looking at a particular theory that requires you to, it only makes sense if you look from this particular point of view. So the cognitive map will structure your ideas and your experiences. It will allow it, you get to clearly understand stuff and you'll be able to reflect upon it, except that any map is going to say, these are the relevant things, this is what you need to pay attention to, here are the relationships that matter. And so any map will constrain your thinking. So that's why it's helpful to have a really complex map, because it has freedom within it to look at things from multiple points of view. Right? Second thing is that the cognitive map allows you to see relationships between things such that you're seeing patterns. One of the things we're going to be looking for here are, what are the patterns by which we can make sense of what's going on in our lives and in the world, and to see these patterns and say, oh, well, this pattern is happening here, but there's this other pattern that interacts with it. And so we begin to see a fuller sense of what it is that's going on. We're able to see with greater depth. So that's what we're looking to be able to do here, is to choose maps that have lots of data points and which fit in the system. So it's necessarily going to be a complicated map. The third thing here is that the map itself facilitates our ability to become more aware of ourselves, because it says this is what you can do for personal growth. But it also, because it says this is what you do, the right thing you need to do is be a vegan. Well, okay, but what about how I treat my kids, or how do I, so a more comprehensive map will not limit our possibilities. It won't say this is the one thing that ultimately matters. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're trying to create as close a relationship with reality as possible. I want to be connected with what is real, and I want to make sense of it in such a way that my sense making is actually valid. It actually relates with reality, and it gives me something that I can actually do, because the cognitive map that doesn't give me anything I can do just makes me feel helpless. There are an infinite number of cognitive maps, but a very small number of them are both accurate insofar as they're really talking about what's actually going on, and they give us things that we can actually do. So that's what we're looking for. But when we really lean into reality, what we discover is chaos. Is all of this stuff happening? I mean, just in terms of what I can see in the world, I know that my eyes only see a fairly narrow bandwidth of the electromagnetic spectrum that we call light, but there's a bunch of this stuff going on that I don't even know about. So there's just way too much for me to deal with it all. It is chaos. I mean, it's what chaos theory is about. So if I'm going to make sense of things here, and actually be able to show up in the world in an effective way, I really want things to be simple. I want to use a simple map because they don't use as much energy, they're efficient, and that's what a heuristic is. It's something that I can do repeatedly again and again, and it's always going to give me the best outcome. That's what I want. But you can't make a cake just by breaking eggs. I mean, I may be really good at breaking eggs, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we need to do in order to make a cake. I need to measure the flour, and I need to set the right temperature, and there's all kinds of things that I have to do. And so baking a cake is actually complicated. It's a whole series of steps, all of which have to be done in the right order for me to get the outcome that I'm looking for. Each step is itself simple, but I have to do it in the right ones, at the right way, at the right time. And part of what we discover is that there are some things we can solve with complicated maps, but some things are just too complex. Back in the 70s, there were some social scientists who were working on the idea that maybe it's possible for the social sciences to be as clear and precise as the physical sciences. Maybe we can have a mathematics of social relationships, and it allows us to really figure out what is the best thing that we can do, or how we can create something, or there's processes. Can we have the same rigor in the social sciences that we have in the physical sciences? And it turns out, no, you can't, because, and the authors of a seminal paper refer to these as wicked problems, and that term will still come up in the literature now. A wicked problem is basically a problem that you cannot find a best solution for because there are too many interrelated, independent but interrelated variables. They're separate things, but when one changes, it changes the other. And when we begin to look at systems and how it is that when this changes, that changes, and all this stuff, we discover that really is incredibly complex, even chaotic. The weather, for example, if we're going to try to predict the weather, I mean, we're fairly good at predicting what the weather's going to be like a couple of hours from now, maybe even a couple of days. We get to 3 days. I got an app on my on my computer. It's 10-day forecast, and it's never accurate 10 days out. It's too much to be able to predict that. So we want to be able to define systems and solve the problems within them, such that we consider these many interdependent variables. That's what makes the solution something that we call complex. It's a complex map. Now, some people will say this is the nature of the system itself, is that it's complex. And I will say every system is ultimately chaotic. The thing is, how do we understand the system, and can we fully define the relevant aspects of the system simply by using complexity when just being complicated isn't going to work? Because ultimately, everything's chaos here. But one of the things that we discover is that the closer we can get to this edge of chaos, the more our understanding of what's happening in the world takes into account the reality of chaos. Chaos is itself a great source of creative energy. So we don't want to get so much chaos that everything falls apart. But a little bit of chaos can really make the system much more vital and innovating. Okay, so 3 last things that I want to talk about here in this segment. One is that when we're talking about complexity and our interest in being connected with complexity, this is related to how it is that we function cognitively. And there's an interesting sidebar we can do here about artificial intelligence, because if somebody is really smart, we think of them as being intelligent, which means that they can look at a situation, understand what it means, know what to do about it. They have a working familiarity with their cognitive maps such that they can make sense of things. And so hey, he's really intelligent. You know, he can know what this means and apply the appropriate map to the appropriate situation. Another aspect of good cognitive functioning is being knowledgeable. Do I remember dates and times? Do I have these facts at my disposal? Now, that's what AI is really good at, because AI can access lots and lots of data very, very quickly. So in that sense, AI can really appear to be quite smart. But the third kind of intelligence here, or of high cognitive functioning, is what we may refer to as wisdom. And wisdom is the capacity to look at a system and to see that there are many relevant variables, and be able to understand which are the relevant variables, how is it that they interact with each other in such a way that we can make sense of what's happening and relate to it to our own best interests. How can I show up in a way that's good for me, for the people I care about, for the larger community, for the planet? So we want to be intelligent and knowledgeable, but wisdom is the hard one. Wisdom is where we're falling short here. And so the 8 orders map is particularly good at helping push us into a capacity for greater, into hierarchies of complexity. Complexities, hierarchies are a way of measuring wisdom. Okay? Now, complexity hierarchies, some people are really allergic to the idea of hierarchies because some kinds of hierarchies, socially constructed hierarchies, are actually very damaging. I mean, the idea that some people are better than other people because I have more money, because I'm a man, because I'm white, because I'm, for all kinds of reasons, if I believe that I am somehow deserving of and above, in some sense, other people in these socially constructed hierarchies, this is hugely problematic for the well-being of our society. But it's not just that hierarchies are bad, because there are also natural hierarchies. There are naturally occurring hierarchies within social groups like chimps or lobsters, but there are also natural hierarchies in the sense that single-celled organisms can evolve into multi-celled organisms and multi-systemed beings. And so evolution happens through the movement from a simple kind of system to an ever more complex system. And it's that movement towards complexity. That's one of the things we can say about the nature of evolution, is that it has a direction. It's moving towards greater and greater complexity. And there's nothing wrong with those hierarchies. It's the socially constructed ones that are problematic. And the final thing that I want to say here is about how being able to think in complex terms actually makes things more simple. All right? The point here is that if I'm able to look at a system, how do I get my teenager to clean his room, or how do I deal with somebody who's a problem at work, I'm going to notice that there are multiple things that I need to take him into account. And when one thing changes, it changes something else. This is a genuinely complex system. And when I can identify what are the relevant dynamics, there's a bunch of stuff's happening that probably aren't relevant. You know, it may be a little bit relevant what it is that my son's listening to in the music these days, but that's not really about him and me and cleaning his room. So that's peripheral to this. What are the relevant variables, and how do they impact each other? And thus, how can I enter into the system in such a way that I'm making the system a healthier one, insofar as it creates what I need and what my son needs and what the room needs? Everybody's gonna benefit from this. Can I do that? Can I think that way? And when I do, when I really understand what's going on here, and I understand what the relevant variables are and how complex this is, I can come to a way of being in the world. There's something I can actually do that will, in fact, make the system better, help to evolve it, to help harmonize it. There is something that I can do, and what I will inevitably discover is that thing that I can do is simple. It's a simple thing to do. It may not have occurred to me that I can do it. It may not be easy to do it, but structurally it's simple. And that's ultimately what we're looking for here is the capacity to make these systems simple, or make our maps about them simple enough that we can make sense of them, that we can create this kind of social harmony for ourselves. All right, so cognitive maps are a great thing, and we need to hold them lightly because sometimes they're faulty. And we want to be able to use the most complex ones available to us. And that's going to take some work, because we have to be able to think in more complex ways. That is, we have to ourselves be wise. Okay, thanks for joining me. And I'll have the next one up just in a little bit.